everybody. My name is Julie, and today I'm taking over my mom's account. She's here with me. We are doing a live stream. We're going to be talking about education, the definitions in the 1828 dictionary, and also the moderndictionary.com definition. So, my mom knows a ton about this content, and I'm here to kind of facilitate this whole technical side of things and also just chat a little bit. So, Mom, if you want to go ahead and do the intro and just talk about, our story and your story that kind of became my story.
It's really amazing to me because my plan for my life is that I wasn't going to get married. I wasn't going to have children. I was going to be an engineer. I had a plan to make submersible generators powered by ocean currents. And I really thought that was my path. I had invested in it with my whole heart and soul. And then I had a very difficult season, and I cried out to the Lord and gave my life to him, hook, line, and sinker, and had already been reading the Bible. And so as I read it, I was just so convicted and made drastic life changes. And it was really fun because I just got to know the Lord more and more. But what came out of that is that John and I got married, we had children, and then I'm reading, and it's, just in reading the Word, I began to desire to homeschool. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But what Julie and I both don't want to do is make it seem like homeschooling's the only solution. But on the other hand, we want to talk about some of the things that we learned through homeschooling. And so maybe that could share, it kind of, as we share, maybe that could encourage some of y'all in the decisions that you're making. And so one of the things that I learned in this process was a broader definition of education. And that's why we kind of want to start there, because if you read the definition from dictionary.com, it says the act or process of imparting or acquiring general knowledge, developing the powers of reasoning and judgment, and generally of preparing oneself or others intellectually for mature life. The act or process of imparting or acquiring particular knowledge or skills as for a profession, a degree, level, or kind of schooling, like a university education. The result produced by instruction, training, or study to show one's education, the science or art of teaching. But the kind of sense that I get from there is mainly academic. And that's what I always thought of with education. And so when I started teaching my children, that was my main focus, is the academics of it all. And if you only focus on that narrow part of it, especially when you're homeschooling, there's all kinds of things that can come up in your day and in your life and in your children's lives that you can see as an inconvenience. But when we read the broader definition, then it really helps.
It is really interesting being a homeschool mom. Now I have 3 kids. Their ages 9, 5, and 3. And like you're saying, if it's only about, that knowledge or, different concepts that we're teaching them, and there isn't a bigger picture, like you said, it could get very frustrating, especially when you have, a 3-year-old or a little baby or, and you're trying to do all these different things for the different ages. It really does help to have a bigger picture.
One of the things that motivated me to homeschool was to be able to pass my faith to the next generation. That was really important to me, because one of the first things that I began to see as I was reading the Bible, and I started reading the Bible when I was 20, which is quite late in life, but it really fascinated me. And one of the things that I noticed was what they call the cycle of nations. And you'd see with Israel how they'd be in such a mess culturally. They'd cry out to the Lord, and the Lord would raise up a deliverer, and he'd marvelously, miraculously save them. And the people would say, we're going to serve you for the rest of our life. And then you'd go to the next chapter, the first verse, and it would say, but the next generation knew not the Lord or his ways. And it just began to baffle me so much. And then you see so much of this people when they're talking about the young people, they're usually not speaking well of them. And so when I began to have children, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to pass my faith on to them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things when we homeschool, it makes it so much easier to pass our faith on. And I can honestly say that I'm delighted that my children all have a biblical worldview. They've married, all of them have married well. And to see Juli homeschooling her children is just such a delight to me. And so I was just thinking as we were preparing for this, how fun this is, just to be doing this together and have the same worldview. And so that's like my biggest reward. And that's captured in this 1828 definition.
And this is at 1828.mschaefer.com. Bringing up as of a child, instruction, formation of manners, education, comprehends all that series of instruction and discipline, which is intended to enlighten the understanding, correct the temper, and form the manners and habits of youth, and fit them for usefulness in their future stations. To give children a good education in manners, arts, and science is important. To give them a religious education is indispensable, and an immense responsibility rests on the parents and guardians who neglect these duties. Wow. There's a lot more there, right?
Yeah. And I think it's going to be fun to just go over each part of it a little bit. And one thing I don't want to do is try to come off as being an expert in this at all, because I'm really not. But, there were some things that I did maybe for 10 or 20 years that I realized, wow, that's not the best way to do it. And so I'm hoping, as we're just open and honest in sharing some of this, that we can help whoever's listening just say, oh, wow, I like that. I'm going to do that. Yeah. And, maybe some of this you won't agree with, but if you pick up a few gems in this and it helps you, then that would just be really cool. The bringing up as of a child. It reminds me of Proverbs 22:6 that says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. And I think that's something that we've lost in our culture, because we kind of have this tendency to think, okay, they're 6 years old, they're going to be doing this, this, and this. Yeah. And, now they're 7, they'll do this, and now they're 8. And what amazed me when I homeschooled you all, I have 4 children. I homeschooled them all for 22 years. That's what I did. I focused on homeschooling the children. And it amazed me how different each one of you was. Yeah. And so, when you start saying bringing up a child in the way he should go, what that speaks to me about is that each one of you had a different gifting and a different purpose.
I've had someone specifically say to me, you can't be an expert at everything. How can you educate your child yourself? And I was like, I don't have to be an expert at everything. There are lots of experts out there. And, you can decide who that expert is going to be for each of your children in each area that they, want to pursue.
That's such a good point, too, because that was the easiest part for me once y'all got into high school, because the first 4 years are so labor intensive for the teacher. You're teaching them how to read, so you're listening to them all the time. You're teaching them how to write, so you're watching them to make sure they are making their letters.
That's my season.
Yeah, it's really time intensive. Yeah. And then in the middle school years, you're teaching them more how to research, which is a blast. Super and so they get a little bit more independent, really, in that. And then in the high school years, it's just amazing. It's like they start blossoming and you start seeing the gifts and talents. And it was kind of scary for me, because especially when JD started showing an interest in computers. And I remember he'd come to me and he'd say, Mom, I don't know how to do this. And I'd tell him, you must go higher than me, my friend. And we would laugh, because that's like a line out of a commercial, But we'd pray together, and we would just ask the Lord to come. And he just showed up in each one of you guys a different way to scaffold you and help us undergird you and launch you into what he had. So it was just a blast. It was fun.
So that's the first part, the bringing up as of a child, instruction,
Yeah.
formation of manners. And I don't know if y'all have read, what is that, George Washington's book of civility and something or other. And it's basically all the things that he learned and like the character traits that he wanted to have and the manners that he wanted to have. That really is inspiring to me. So if you guys haven't seen that, maybe I can link to that after this is over. And you can check it. Rules for Civility and something. I'm surprised it's not on your shelf, but behind you right now.
Because I gave it to you.
But it's real small, and it's got like, I don't know, maybe 100 or 108 or something like that. Just like little things like don't do this and don't do that. And some of them are based on the time. And these days we're like, what is he even talking about? But some it's just neat to see that, when he was a kid, he really cared about, having good manners. And then education comprehends all that series of instruction and discipline. And really, we were talking about discipline and like discipling and just like making sure that we're teaching the kids the right thing to do instead of just getting upset when they're doing the wrong thing. Or we've talked about this before on a video that we can link, talking about the generations working together. Maybe we'll link that in the comments later. But just talking about training them, like teaching them the right way to do things and then being with them. I know there's a scripture that talks about like a boy who isn't being watched is like a stress to his parents, or it's like it's one of those like Proverbs or something. But I think about that a lot because, and it's impossible to have them right next to you all the time, but making sure that we know what they're up to and that we're teaching them what they should be doing intentionally instead of just responding to things is helpful in the long run, although it's hard, in the current situation when that's your current season. But I think it really is important. Kevin?
And it's worth it. It's worth it, isn't it? I remember somewhere I would look for these, what your child can do at age 5, and then each stage, so you kind of have an idea of what you could be teaching them. I even had a chart, and every summer I teach you guys new chores during the summer, and everybody would kind of shift their responsibilities. But my goal was to have that whole chart that you guys could nail it. I mean, and you guys kind of teased me a little bit, well, why aren't you doing anything? Why are we doing all the chores? And then when you guys all left, it was like, oh my goodness, I got to do everything now. But my goal was that you wouldn't struggle when you left home, that you'd be equipped. And then I have, different ones of you have come to me and said, Mom, my friends don't know how to manage their finances. They don't know how to make a budget. They don't know how to do this or that. And I was just thinking the other day, I'd like to get into that more, just those practical things. And so maybe that could branch out of this or something.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I remember too, like when I was younger, getting in trouble, especially with my daddy, for things that he really hadn't taught me. And he was such a good dad, for the most part. He was like such a good dad. But I just remember that frustrated me. And so I think that's something that when we realize, hey, that's part of the children's education, then instead of a distraction, it's like, okay, I'll fit this in because this is important and you're going to benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And it's funny because I hear some of those same things like what do I have to do all of this? And I'm like, really? Because now as an adult, you see how, or as a mom, you see how much you're actually doing still. Okay, so the instruction discipline, which is intended to enlighten the understanding, correct the temper, so character development, and we had mentioned that some days you have those days where character development has to be the focus, and everything else has to take a back seat, and it's hard because you want to, you have your things that you're doing, and I don't know about y'all, but I feel like I'm constantly doing something. And there are days and times when I have to halt everything. And I had one of those moments today with one of my kids where we prayed together because we were having some difficulty in certain things. And it didn't completely fix the problem for forever. But in that moment, there was a shift in what I was seeing, the reason why we were praying. And I was like, man, I really want to share that with her because it's so powerful. And I feel like sometimes it can be like, oh, yeah, okay, just, say a prayer and then it's going to fix everything. But I really did like immediately see a transition in attitude. And, but it's pray without ceasing. It's not pray once and you're good forever. So it is something that we're going to have to keep doing, but it was just neat to see that there literally was okay, it's not that mommy has to have all the answers or mommy, is always going to do the right thing. It's, me modeling to the younger generation. Okay, I'm struggling because of this. Let's pray about it. And even if, I'm like, oh, why am I at this point where we're having a hard time? It's being used for good. It's being used as an example for them for their entire lives, that when we are going through a hard time or we're struggling with something or an attitude or whatever, we can pray about it together. So yeah, definitely turned it around for good. So yeah, as far as the temper, and then just, the manners and habits of youth and just learning. I know you wanted to talk about Lamaze style learning, Mom, and learning with your kids. And I just love that.
Yeah. That's when I got a breakthrough because it was really hard for me to homeschool. I wasn't going to have children, and I feel like that kind of wrong attitude made me lose some of the time that I could have been preparing, when I was younger to be a good mommy. And so it was a struggle. But that whole concept, like the word lamad is a Hebrew word, and their word for learning is the same word that their word for teaching is. Mm-hmm. It's lamad. Lamad means to learn and to teach. And I began to realize that I could relax a little bit and learn while I was teaching. And I began to really enjoy it. I became a student of teaching and child behavior and being a better mommy and doing things better. And then once I just kind of relaxed, it all became fun. And it gave me a generational viewpoint that even if I didn't have to be perfect, what I was trying to do is pass a heritage to my children. And then especially, now that I see my grandchildren, I see you homeschooling and I see you, I feel like sincerely taking it to the next level. That I'm like, oh, those are some of the things that I wanted to do, but look, she's doing it.
And hopefully my kids will take it on to the next level, because there's some things that I feel like you did way better than I do them. But, I think we each have our own styles, and even beyond like the generational, because yes, there will be building, but there's also different personalities. There's different learning types. I have access to things now that you did not have access to, and yet that might come as a negative in some ways. I think there are pros and cons to having your hands, being able to have everything at your fingertips. It can be beneficial, but it can also be overwhelming. And so I think there's definitely pros and cons in many different ways. But it has helped to, I feel like I'm not as nervous about homeschooling as maybe someone who's first generation. We have these terms, first generation and second generation homeschoolers. I feel like there is a bit of a confidence there because I've kind of seen how it works. But there's always going to be different learning styles and all that kind of stuff. So that's exciting though. And I really love that, that you don't have to know everything, and that I get to learn with my kids as we go. And it's exciting for me because I feel like there's this thing about women's education, and that women should have a right to an education. And as a homeschool mom, you get to get educated over and over and over, depending on how many kids you have. I have 3 kids, so I get to learn these things, and we kind of cycle through things as they get older, but also each of the grades I get to learn it over. And I'm just like, that is such an amazing education as you're going through your homeschool journey. And what a blessing that is to not only go through education once, but be able to go through it multiple times with different kids and learning styles. And you learn how to become a better teacher as you go. And that's a skill set. You really are learning a skill set. So that's exciting to me.
Yeah, that is really neat. And that's the thing I want to really encourage maybe moms that are thinking about homeschooling or maybe have been, but they're a little bit frustrated with it is, just love your kids and enjoy them, because what you want to impart to them most of all is a love of learning. And when everyone has that love of learning, there's so many ways that we can research now and brush up on those things that maybe either we forgot or maybe, it's hard. You can't teach everything.
That is so true. That is so true. And I think we're going to talk more about different types of curriculum and that sort of thing. But that is one thing that if I don't say it later, I want to say it real quick, that I heard someone say that you're always going to have gaps in curriculum. Like, there's always going to be something that doesn't get covered, and we can worry about this and say, oh no, like I didn't teach them correctly or enough or something. But I do want to focus on the goal with education. I think this fits, that we're teaching them to love learning and to be able to learn for their entire life. So it's not like, oh, I have to make sure I teach them everything they need to know about this, and this in this amount of time. Because if we're teaching them to be able to read, to be able to research, to be able to, love learning, and we're going to talk more about the different ways of, research and everything, but then they can do it forever, and they can learn whatever they want. And if they have a humble heart and a teachable spirit, which is what, these character traits that we want them to have, if they have patience, that's a big one. And I've read a lot of books that talk about, just being able to focus these days is like a skill in the marketplace. Being able to like pay attention is something that we're losing. We're losing our ability to really pay attention. This is something I'm working on with myself, is just being able to monotask. We've got so far into multitasking that we're kind of coming back and these are all these character traits. And if we're teaching our kids these character traits, they're going to have a better opportunity if they're working for somebody else, saying, look, I'm going to focus on the job. I'm going to get it done. I'm not going to, be goofing around doing something I shouldn't be doing. I'm going to be this is literally transferring into their life, into their career, into their marriage if they can't pay attention to what their spouse is saying. These are the character traits that we need to impart into them for all these different facets of their life in the future. But they're always going to have those gaps in their curriculum. So if that's like a fear of yours, what if I don't teach them everything? Teach them, as much as you can, teach them the basics. Be a good steward of your child, of course. We all want to be a good steward of what God gives us. But know that there are going to be gaps, and that if you teach them to love learning, to, apply themselves if they want to learn something, encourage them that learning is fun and learning is awesome, and it's like you can expand your mind. It's so interesting. Then they can learn whatever they want, and you don't have to worry about, I didn't teach them everything, because no one can ever know everything, right? We're not God. So. Yeah, that encourages.
And what I loved is, and we skipped over this one part, I think you mentioned it, but enlighten their understanding. God helped me so many times when I didn't quite know how to teach you guys, because every summer I would look at each subject, I'd look at each one of you guys, tailor every year, the 5 main subjects to each one of you, and he'd always help me with that. And so I want to encourage anyone who's listening and maybe you just feel like you're at a wall, ask the Lord to enlighten your understanding, because he's so good. And ask him, you can even teach your children to pray that, Lord, help me understand this, because he's just amazing. So, and then the next section I have is fit them for usefulness in their future stations. And I think what's fascinating is how in the Hebrew culture and in the pioneering culture, when the children turned like 12 or 13, they started going into the adult world, whether they were apprenticed, mentored, they began to take on adult responsibilities. And I think there's so many benefits when we expect that of our children, because they rise to that level of what you're expecting from them. It gives them a challenge. And I think some of the things that we're expecting our teenagers to do wouldn't even happen if we begin treating them like an adult and gave them exciting, challenging things to do.
Right. Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast about kids and social media, and it was super good. And they were talking about teaching your kids how to use social media because otherwise they're going to learn later. And if you wait until they've already learned on their own, and you didn't have the opportunity to teach them, and kind of mentor them and how to use things, they're not, they're going to have more of a benefit if you can be there alongside them, showing them the right ways to use things, the wrong ways to use things, how it could be a tool for good or for, bad stuff or stuff that's not going to benefit you in the long run. I thought that was really interesting that they were talking about it, because it can be like, oh, there's bad stuff on there, so I'm not going to let them ever touch a phone ever forever. But there is like an age of accountability where it is, they're going to have to learn these things because it's not going away. Social media is here, and to be able to teach them and use it as a tool, for the right reasons. And I totally identified with that thought that, oh, like, bad things could happen, so I'm just like going to keep them as far away from that as possible instead of equipping them to be able to use it for the right reasons and and use it well. So that was very interesting to me, just kind of on that topic of equipping them for their future.
I think that's a really good word, is equipping.
Yeah.
Like the full fivefold ministry.
Right.
The whole purpose is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry.
Right.
And when you look at our children, that's what we're doing, is we're equipping them to come into all that God has for them. And it's such an adventure. I just get so in awe of God when I think of how he does that. He literally establishes his covenant with each one of us, and that looks differently with each one of us. It's amazing.
If anybody has anything they want to talk about, let us know in the comments, and we will be doing 5 or 6 more videos like this. And so we would love to know what any of your questions are about homeschooling or about parenting or home care while you're homeschooling, anything like that. So if you have any questions about topics you would like us to cover in the future, leave them in the comments. Did you have something you want to share, Mom?
You know what? I can't find it. So I think this is a good place to stop, because I really don't want to shortchange that conversation. That's going to be a very good conversation. But the very last line of that definition is to give them a religious education is indispensable, and an immense responsibility rests on parents and guardians who neglect these duties. Now, when I started studying this definition at first, I'm like, that's a really weird way to word it, because the responsibility rests on all of us. But I think we've all seen when parents are diligent to raise their children well, and they raise adults that are independent. And so when they leave, they can nail it when they go out there. They can really, conquer that field that they have such an interest and a passion for. Whereas if we don't train our children well, then we have problems with them, and we see so many people disrespecting the younger culture. And I would urge parents, instead of that, to really try to finish strong with their children's education and look ahead to where they're headed and see how you can help them and scaffold them and launch them and equip them. And when you do that, then you don't have as much of the rebellion, because you're helping them. And I think that whole thing that our culture expects teenagers to be rebellious, I don't think that's a godly concept. I think it's more of a frustration in the younger people, whereas if we're proactive and we're helping them, then there's going to be a camaraderie there instead.
Oh yeah, it's been exciting to see. I mean, even my kids are younger, but just to see them learning new things. Each time they learn something new, it's really exciting to me, because I know all the work that went into it. And there are a lot of people, they won't see the behind the scenes. But it is work, and work is good. You know, work came before.
Mm.
I heard somebody say work came before the fall. So it's not like it was only because of the fall that we worked. Yes, it became harder, but we were managing things, you know, we were called to manage things before the fall happened. You know, in the garden, we were to have dominion over everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought that was exciting just to think about that. That yes, things just because things are, you know, something that we need to do doesn't mean that it's bad or whatever should be viewed that way. But it's a blessing and it's a great calling, and I'm excited to see what happens as my kids get older and we get more into you know, the next stage. My one of my kids is in fourth grade right now, and so in the next couple of years we're going to be in a new season with learning, and I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be super fun, and I also have a kindergartner and then a preschooler, so it's just it's hard but it's fun, and it's rewarding when they learn things, and I'm able to be part of that with them. So thank you to everybody who's been here. Like we said, we're going to be talking about reading, writing, arithmetic, and then research, reason, relate, and record next week. And we'll have some other, you know, information to share with y'all. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. If you have any things that you would like us to talk about, any, you know, comments, whatever, you can go ahead and leave those. We'll be checking on those in the next couple of days. And then we will have our next live show next Thursday at 3 o'clock, same time, same place. And my website is beautifulhorizon.com, and I'm selling these coffee mugs in there that says he has made everything beautiful in its time, Ecclesiastes 3:11. That's my my theme scripture, and it says pursuing a beautiful horizon. So that's beautifulhorizon.com/store, and there are a few printables that are free in there. I'll be putting some paid printables in there when I get my act together. But right now there's just some free printables that y'all can check out, and also the coffee mug just because it's fun. So thanks, Mom, for letting me hop on here with you, and we will see you all next week, next Thursday, 3 o'clock, same place. Have a great week, and I'm going to end this live now. Bye.
God bless y'all. Thank you.